Good afternoon and welcome to Birdland Media Works. I'm your host, Danielle Palli, and today I'm joined by co-host Cindy Readnower. Cindy Readnower is the owner of Skinny Leopard Media, author, and my co-host for our sister podcast, Discernment Radio, People and Topics to Enhance Your Life. We're also joined by Kyra Oser. Kyra is a professional psychic, hypnotherapist, past life regressionist, Reiki Master, and medium. She is also an accomplished artist and currently hosts America's Love Channel on KKNW Seattle. Kyra Oser specializes in supporting clients with pain management, breaking unhealthy habits, weight loss, and relationships, as well as helping actors, writers, artists, and musicians maximize their creative and financial potential. Today's topic is psychic ability. What is it, and do you have it? Kyra Oser, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So I'm really excited about this interview because what our listeners don't know is that you and I were neighbors as kids, and I think we had this entrepreneurial spirit then because we would pretend we were fashion and entertainment magazine publishers, or we were choreographing our dance numbers for our rise to Broadway fame. Now, before I go too far down memory lane, can you share with our listeners a little bit more about you and your work?
Oh, thank you for asking, and thank you for having me on your show today. And my work, well, I am a tarot card reader, I am a hypnotherapist, a past life regressionist, a future life progressionist. I am a psychic channel, and I've worked as a psychic medium, but I don't make that my focus. I tend to channel for people and see whatever may come in, whether it's someone showing up from the past, people from the future, or relationships in the present. And I focus a lot on relationships and career, but the thing that I love to do the most is medical intuitive work, to see and anticipate physical problems someone may have so that they can then go get help, hopefully, as early as possible. So I look for warning signs. I scan someone visually, internally, within my own mind, and then I ask them to go check that out. Or I may be scanning them for past things that are coming back.
Wow, that is a lot of abilities. So when did you first discover you had these abilities, and was it difficult to talk to other people when you first realized it?
No, it wasn't difficult to talk about it. I can say I get emotional talking about this. The first time that I wanted to read the future was I loved my grandmother so much. I don't know if you ever met her, Danielle, but she lived in Philadelphia, and I was so close to her. And when I first started hearing that people die, I got really worried that I would lose her. And I also loved her sister, who was still around. And so I decided that I was going to read their palms to see how long they would live so that I would have enough time with them. Wow. So I started reading up on palmistry at the children's library, and I don't know how I found a palmistry book there at the school library, but I guess they were open-minded enough to have some excerpts, or it is something they overlooked. So I would read their palms and try to see if they had a long or a strong lifeline and look for signs of strength and health. And what I saw with my great aunt was a long, strong lifeline. And with my grandmother, it was broken toward the end. And as it turns out, my grandmother did have health problems, and she did pass well before my great aunt.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry that happened, but I think it's quite fascinating how you just are like, I'm going to learn this, and then just did. So
what's interesting about that is I only found out recently through my father that my grandmother did this work too, that she would tell the future, and that my father has, to a certain degree, done that as well. And it's just something that runs through that line of the family. With my father, it shows more through numbers, and he was an accountant, so that makes sense. Yeah. So what we would do is we would go to the grocery store, and he would just glance at the cart, and he would be able to instantly know within $1 every time how much the entire grocery bill would be, including tax. I don't know how much of that was psychic and how much of it is just that he's good with numbers, but he was very accurate with it.
I wish he were local because I'd bring him with me because I spend far too much on groceries.
I know, I need him to help me budget.
So now in my experience growing up, things like psychic ability, energy healing, past life regressions, this was all woo-woo and not really highly regarded. Do you think that perception is changing now? Why or why not?
I do think it is changing, and I think part of that is social media and the internet, being able to discover more about different cultures and the way that people have lived throughout the world, being exposed to more. and also the shift in religions and how we perceive religions, because with being able to access so much information about different ways people live throughout the world and different beliefs that people have, it's very easy to see the common thread that runs through so many religions. And I think more and more people are becoming open-minded about other religions. I think that shifts what we seek out spiritually and makes it more acceptable to look into this sort of work. At the same time, I have experienced and seen religions that are trying to become more and more insulated to protect themselves from being exposed to other religions throughout the world, or to protect their children from being exposed to other religions. And what happens in that case is that those groups may tend, just some people within those groups, not everyone, I'm not generalizing, but some of those groups or some of those people within those groups may tend to be even more skeptical about psychic phenomena right now. So there are those two extremes, but I feel like the majority of people are ready for a change within this realm.
One of the benefits of social media, because we're exposed to it whether we like it or not, and I think it's gone a long way to make people kind of force them, whether willingly or not, to kind of open their mind, because it's everywhere. And except in those places that you reference where people are secluded, and I think that technology has actually worked to our advantage in this case.
And when you do this kind of work with people, do you get people that are so skeptical that they're ever rude, or they treat you in a way that you have to prove to them that you actually are doing what you do?
I encountered that especially toward the beginning of doing this work, when I didn't have the privilege of being able to have as much discretion about which clients I was choosing. For instance, I was working at a psychic shop and people would just be sent to my office. And that has happened. It's rare. But when it occurred, I would usually let someone know that I didn't sense that this work was for them right now. Maybe there was someone else they would want to see. And I wouldn't push me further if that person was becoming borderline emotionally abusive, if it ever got to that point, which is rare, but it has happened. And then there are some instances where someone was skeptical, but I could tell that they were being polite about it, and I would continue with the reading. I find that when I have clients or new clients who are not ready for the work, it helps if I say in the very beginning, please let me know within the first few minutes if this work isn't for you. I will understand. We will work it out. But I want you to tell me that, because I may be so focused on channeling and doing my work that I might not be tuned in to how that person's feeling at that very moment. I'm not omniscient. So it really helps to have that established in the first session. And if someone comes back, then it's always fine. Then I know that they liked the first session because they bothered to come back.
So is there ever any information that you withhold from somebody that you see for their future?
I tend to be very careful about how I deliver the information. So if I see something about someone's future, there's a reason that's coming up. But there are ways to say it that are gentle, caring. I try to think about what would it be like if I was this person hearing the information right now, and then behave that way so that I'm not being hurtful in my delivery. But I don't think it's helpful to hold back. And in fact, I have held back in the past, and I have a story about that if you'd want to hear it. I worked at a psychic shop in Los Angeles. When I say psychic shop, it was a spiritual bookstore. They sold candles and spiritual books, and there were also psychic readers there and astrologers. And while I was there, there was a lovely young lady with a kind heart who was working there at the front register. And she would dress the candles as well with oils. And I remember walking past her one day. I was coming to work, and she was to the right of me behind the counter, and I stopped. I just stood still. And this had never happened to me before to this extent. I had a vision very clearly of her being shot in the back of the head.
Oh, my.
And when I saw that, I saw it as if it was happening right in the area where I was, which was the Valley area of Los Angeles. So I knew it was going to be local. I knew it was going to be her, and I knew she was going to be shot. And within my mind, I thought, when? Because I've learned to ask questions and not just let my mind then go to the next thing, which might have been eating breakfast, having coffee, something really mundane. And when I asked when, what I got was 2 weeks.
Oh, my.
And I thought, oh, my God, within 2 weeks, she's going to be shot. And here are my next thoughts. I was thinking, do I want her looking over her shoulder for the rest of her life? Do I want to scare someone unnecessarily? Or is this something that I could actually help her with? And I truly didn't know where to go with it. So I kind of put it on hold, and she sensed something. She looked to her left. She looked at me and said, what? And I said, nothing. And she said, no, you're thinking something. What? And I said, nothing. And I went and I did my work that day. 2 weeks later to the day, she came up in the news. I received a Facebook message that was sent to everyone who worked at the shop, which was over 30 people. And it said, you didn't have to go so soon. Oh. And it was a picture from the manager at the psychic shop. It was a picture from the local news. It was an aerial view over the hospital of a truck that she had been in. And when her boyfriend went into the 7-Eleven, he had left a gun in his glove compartment. She took it out and she shot herself in the head.
Oh, my.
And she was only 20 years old, I believe, and such a tragic loss. And I really felt conflicted after that over what I tell people, what I don't tell people. What I can realize is that with suicide, if it was going to happen, it was going to happen. No one could monitor another person 24/7.
Absolutely.
And there was an astrologer who helped me through this and said, well, if you had said it to her and she still did that, which in all likelihood she would have done anyway, even if I had told her I had that vision, maybe you would have thought that you planted that suggestion in her mind. And it did help to hear that. But I am definitely more specific now about what I receive. Not just specific, but I do bring it up even if it's something tragic or that I wouldn't want to talk about. But I'm careful about the delivery in that I'll say, there's something I'm going to tell you. You're probably not going to like hearing it. Do you want me to tell you? And then I let that person choose if they're ready to hear it.
Wow, that's a very profound story. Mm-hmm. So can you share another example of a time that your work has affected somebody or changed their life in a way that is perhaps very positive?
A lot of those are situations where I pick up on someone's future love partner. And so people will often come to me and say, who do you see in my future? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the person I see is going to be their lifetime soulmate, but it might be the next relationship that they're coming up with. I had someone come in. This was not a love example, but I had someone come in and I mentioned a name and I said, do you know someone by this name? So I'm keeping it anonymous since these are my clients, but I mentioned a male name. I'll just say Kyle, but that's not the actual name. And I said, I feel like somebody named Kyle has worked with you before, and I'm sensing it was about 10 years ago, and I see a lot of textiles around, and I feel like you're both artists, and you're at a company, and I just feel like it would be so good for you to reconnect with this person right now. So this is more of a career situation. And she said, that's so funny, because I did work with a Kyle about 10 years ago, and he was a fashion designer, and I'm a fashion designer, and I just got in touch with him again last week. Maybe I should, and I reached out to him. I didn't hear back. Maybe I should reach out again, and she did, and they've become close friends again. So it was one of those situations where I think that my prompting through what I was receiving as a channel was able to encourage her to continue that friendship, which became a very positive thing for both of them. But I've also done that with people's love partners, and I have set up a couple once. Well, more than once, but I set up a couple once where they have been together for over 20 years and they have 4 children, but they were friends, so it's a little different.
So now, do you think that having psychic ability is inborn, like you either have it or you don't, or can anyone learn if they're trained and practice regularly?
Anyone can learn if they are trained and practice regularly and are of sound enough minds to comprehend the information. There are situations where even, for instance, if there is a tsunami coming, you'll notice animals run to the hills before the tsunami comes. run with the animals, listen to them, listen to nature. They know, because they're so open and so connected to nature already that they just naturally will pick up on things about the future and anticipate things. And I think that's part of a survival instinct that we all have. So I also think that with intuition, it can be easier to tap into that in younger years when we might not have as much judgment on it. But I also believe that there is a range of skills. So some people are born with more innate ability than others, and some people have to work harder to get more psychic information, and some people will naturally have it come to them. However, there are techniques that can be learned. There is a way to train the mind. There are many ways to train the mind. And I've found that the harder I work at it, the better it gets. The more often I do it, the better it gets. And it's very much like being an athlete. I have to keep in training. I have to continue practicing in order to be good at this work.
That makes a lot of sense. And if somebody were learning on their own, is there any danger to that, or would you recommend they find somebody who already has experience?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I haven't had any experience with anything bad happening by people training themselves. But I can't say that that's not a possibility because I don't know every situation. I think that if someone is in an emotionally fragile period during their lives, that it's probably best to do this in a group and to at the very least work with someone else who has been there before, so that it's not necessarily emotionally triggering. For instance, if someone has PTSD and has had a lot of circumstances where there's been trauma that hasn't healed yet, and they want to, for instance, navigate other people's past, I don't see it being dangerous necessarily, although I can't say it wouldn't be. I think that it can be triggering to look into someone else's past if one's own past hasn't been dealt with and worked on. Because what is important in a reading is that I am setting aside my ego, I am setting aside my personal experiences, and I am traversing this person's past, present, or future without the natural biases that I have as a human. I don't think I can ever do that 100%, but I aim to do it as much as I possibly can. And I do say a prayer before I do the work to set aside my ego, and if I can please just see this person's life as I need to see it for the highest good and with the best intentions for their future. But I think that it does help to work with groups, and I have taught groups before, but we all work as a group together in a circle, and I do exercises with people. I've done these at different psychic bookstores before as workshops. Do exercises where I will, for instance, say, we're going to go around the circle and we'll have partners, and one partner will read, the other person will just say a symbol or the first thing that comes to their mind. So they make eye contact. And before they get the symbol, here's the thing. The other person asks a question, but they ask the question in their mind. So for instance, I would say, Danielle, I'm going to have you ask a question in your mind. And then you ask a question in your mind, whatever that may be. And then I tell you out loud the symbol that I get. And then through that symbol, you can interpret a meaning, kind of like interpreting a work of art history, and see how that symbol or that dream symbol that I'm picking up on, maybe from the collective unconscious mind, maybe from your subconscious mind, maybe from some extrinsic spirit out there beyond all of us. I'm picking up that information, relaying that message to you, and then you can take that for whatever it means to you as an answer. But eventually what I have everyone do in the circle is to say their question out loud later on, so that we can all look at how the symbol relates to the question, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and after the call, Cindy, we have to try that. Because
I'm curious to hear what you get.
And it sounds like a collaborative too, because it's the person sending the intention of the message and the other person receiving it. So it's probably, they're both, I guess, doing the work at the same time, it sounds like.
Absolutely. It's very collaborative. And I believe this is something like what people probably did before we had telephones. We had to communicate psychically. We couldn't always wait for a telegram to come by horseback. Yeah. Now, I know people who are light workers, as they often refer to themselves, and they
Many of the people I know go through a process in preparation for a client visit that starts well before the person walks through the door. Can you talk a little bit about your process? Do you prep, or is it kind of instant?
Oh, you may laugh about my process. I eat a really big meal, ladies. I eat as much as I can. I need lots of fuel. I know some people will want to have an empty stomach, or I'm sure you've heard of vision journeys that shamans may do where they don't eat for a day or more. That is not me. I need coffee or tea, or sometimes both. Lots of food, lots of protein, and then I feel more prepared. So part of it for me is self-care. And when I come to a session and I've taken good care of myself, then I can help take care of someone else even better. And then I will meditate. I will say a prayer, and I will try to pick up information about someone before they come in if I have the time. If I don't have the time, then I just do it one-on-one while I'm with them. But the longer I've done this, the less time it takes to prepare.
I like her process.
That's
Pizza
wonderful.
and beer before every reading. No,
It's the psychic buffet. That's my technique.
So you get information before they come, but what about when they leave? Does that close the door, or do you still continue to receive information?
That doesn't always close the door. It often does, though, because I have learned to have boundaries with it. So if someone leaves and then someone else comes in soon after that, I need to have a pure reading of that next person without having an overlap with the previous client. So I have learned to shut it down. However, I have sometimes had a dream about a client, or I will pick up information later on about someone. So what I'll do is I'll email them and say, I got a little more information. Would you like to know what I picked up on? And if they say yes, then I will answer. In the past, I would just email them and throw out all the information there, and not everybody was ready for it. So I've learned to ask first for their permission. And so I don't charge for that when I do that, because they weren't expecting it or asking for it. But if I feel really compelled to tell them, especially if it's something about their health or the health of someone in their lives, I will definitely let them know that I have information to share.
Okay. So for the other people that you were saying that you have these circles that you help people develop their talents, is there anything for those people that may not be ready for that yet that you would recommend they do to just starting out develop these talents?
It's okay to read books about it. There's a book called You Are Psychic by, I believe it's P.D. Sanders Jr., and that is one of the first books that I worked with when I was a teenager. I was wanting to learn about how to develop the different psychic senses, and it's a basic book where there are different exercises for developing clairvoyance, so psychic seeing, clairaudience, psychic hearing, claircognizance, psychic knowing. Well, you ladies know these different techniques, I'm sure, but the exercises were really easy for me to access at that time. So that's a start. And also it helps to read autobiographies or any other information about people who have gone before. And if that's the sort of thing that you're interested in reading, if you like reading autobiographies.
Okay.
I find that for anything in life, it helps to read autobiographies of those who have gone before you and who have succeeded at doing what you aim to do. It's very encouraging, and then also you can learn from their mistakes and not make them yourself.
Yeah. Okay. And very validating, I would think, because there are times where you read something, you're like, oh, me too, that happened to me, and maybe you didn't even realize what was happening until you read from somebody else's experience.
Absolutely.
So now I think it's absolutely fascinating that you've made a business. I mean, this is your thing, and I can hear people kind of listening to this wondering, how do I do that? So can you talk a little bit about the challenges you've faced being a business owner, and what's the best part about it?
Oh, I can tell you right away, the best part about it is being independent and not working for anyone and not having a boss. Well, if your ladies are into astrology, I have 4 planets in Sagittarius. And I also have a stellium in the 4th house, which is related to the sun sign Cancer. And that has to do with the home. And so not just a stellium, which is 4 or more planets, but I have 6 planets, and there aren't many more planets than that, in the 4th house. So what I've been told by astrologers in the past is that I will do really well working for myself through my home. And by the time I was told that, I was already doing it.
Right.
So being also 4 planets in Sagittarius, I tend to do better not working for an authority figure, working for myself. And so the challenges of having a business, I would say being a psychic is very different from owning a business. So it's necessary for me to jump between my right and left brain frequently, and I would rather be in the right brain and in the creative side of my brain and doing the psychic channeling. But running a business means running a website and communicating with clients, running some different social media, online, etc. And so booking events, for instance. And with all of that, I think that it would be very easy to get caught up in the minutia of running a business and to neglect the part of the brain that is psychically channeling, and that's coming from such a different place. So I think it's really important to stay in practice and to, if possible, spend more time on developing one's skills than actually running the business. It does help to delegate responsibilities, but that's not always possible, especially in the beginning.
So can you tell us about America's Love Channel?
America's Love Channel is something that started out in another version on CBS Radio back in, I think it was 2011. And it has gone through a few different identities, different titles, different casts. I'm the only one from the original cast who's still left, but there still is someone who comes in and out, an astrologer once in a while. I call her the Cosmic Comic because she's very funny. She's also a comedian, and she also does comedy, improv comedy in Hollywood still, so it's really fun having her on. But she's been there for many years and through a couple of different versions of the show. And with America's Love Channel, the original idea with that was that 3 psychics, it would be 1 psychic medium, a tarot card reader and past life regressionist, and an astrologer, would all be having a business together, would be having a radio show together, and that we would be matchmaking people with our psychic abilities to help them find their soulmates. So that was the concept behind what we were doing. We were actually doing that, but we were working with clients and helping them to find that I have on my website.
Okay.
And that's still part of what it's about, but it's also become about helping people in their day-to-day lives in terms of where their career is going and other areas of their lives, because sometimes in looking for a soulmate, looking for something else in our lives and wondering why that's not happening yet, sometimes it's not happening yet because there's something else on our journey that we're meant to look at or work on first. And it's very easy to get really obsessed with, where is that partner? Why don't I have that ideal partner in my life? When life might be saying to us, well, maybe this year it's about something else. Maybe this year it's about healing, or it's about developing your career, or it's about looking after your children, or being more close to family, or whatever may be on the agenda for you at that time.
Interesting.
So it might be a better question, not where's my soulmate, but what do I need to do in my life to attract that soulmate?
Right. Well, and maybe it's that you are going to meet your soulmate on one of these other journeys that life's trying to take you on, but that you're ignoring because you're trying to meet your soulmate, if that makes any sense. So it's like, listen to what life is showing you and try to stay open to the different areas that you're moving into, because I do find that if you get out there and join groups of people who are like-minded, who have similar interests, or particularly joining an environmental activism group, or joining a group where people are doing good things that are helpful to others, you're more likely to run into somebody who's like-minded and where there's going to be mutual attraction on a soul level if you are connecting to those groups of people. And along the way, you'll be most likely gratified with the work that you're doing. And if you want to meet someone who's generous, if you've had issues in the past with having partners in your life who were not able to be generous, or who were not able to be giving, or who were not as caring, joining some kind of volunteer organization is really helpful for meeting those who can give of themselves.
Good idea.
Who can be charitable.
And it's like, it makes me think of the Gandhi quote, be the change you wish to see in the world. I mean, you kind of have to become the person you're trying to attract. So if you want somebody who's generous, volunteer, make sure that you're fulfilling that generosity. And I don't know if that's what you're saying. That's just what comes to mind.
Yes. Oh, Oh, yes. And it's also a new version of it could be the person you want to date in the world. Be the partner that you want to meet. And by the way, I got part of this idea about going out and meeting people through volunteer groups from Butch Patrick. He was Eddie Munster, but he was our co-host. He was my co-host on the show for years. And that was one piece of advice that he gave to people about relationships that I found was, applicable even in my own life. And it's just very helpful to know that you connect to groups of people who are similar to you. If one group doesn't work out, try another group. If it's just once or twice a week, if you can manage that. I find that that's so great as well. Such good advice that he gave, because you can then also be developing and working on yourself at the same time, but you also get to see other people and how they interact naturally with others, not how they are on a date, which you can bring your date face. You can be wearing the date mask. Some people do. We show our best selves in the very beginning. But if you get to see someone in a group, you see how they deal with conflict. You can see what kind of personality they have, how they deal with challenges, and really figure out for yourself, is this someone I really would want to have a relationship with, before you get involved, and only to find out later that this is not someone you can really have a relationship with.
Now, in your newsletter, which I am subscribed to,
thank you.
You give predictions about things happening in the world. Would you be willing to share just one thing that's happening in the world that we should keep our eye on?
I do updates regularly about different predictions for the future in many different areas. In politics, what I'm seeing is with the rise of authoritarian figures around the world, and particularly with the shift in politics that we have seen within the U.S., what's happening for us now is that we're having a conflict between what the public wants and what is occurring at the highest levels of government, not just in the U.S., but throughout the world. This is happening in many different countries. And the higher purpose that I see that serving is that, first of all, it's created a lot of activism, which is going to be really helpful for combating climate change. And this is right on the precipice of a time where it's important that we work on climate change. So that's coming about at just the right time, because many of these regimes will not last for very long, but the earth will. And so that's the bigger issue, is how we work within the confines of environmental changes. So in working against, I don't want to say working against, in different groups having to fight upper ranks of government or fight corporations for their rights, it's like we're training our activism muscles so that eventually we can work on bigger issues that have to do with our relationship with nature and how we improve that relationship. And with Uranus going into Taurus, Taurus has to do with nature. This is an ideal time for us to, in very unusual ways, start to use our activism, which is Uranus, which rules Aquarius, and which is an activist sign, if any of you out there are Aquarians. And so right now, this is supposed to be a time of environmental activism, even based on how astrology has shifted. So another thing that I've seen about all of this and how it's being helpful in the future is that we also see a major disparity economically worldwide, again, not just in the U.S., but a lot of times we'll see some things, at least since the 1960s, changing within the U.S., and then there's sort of a domino effect throughout the world. So again, we're kind of at the start of this, but we're seeing these shifts occur at the highest level of corporations, where there's a huge disparity between what CEOs are making and the way most people are able to live, and the amount of access to money and resources that most people have. That's meant to change too. We're also going through an economic revolution. And again, Taurus relates to money. And so Uranus and Taurus means that we're meant to move into a time of an economic revolution, not just a revolution in the way that we relate to the earth. It's both, and they're going to be connected. So the more that we have egalitarianism in our economy, the more that people have access to more earthly resources, the better things are actually going to get with the planet. It's actually going to shift. So part of the problem with what's going on in the planet has to do with who's holding the economic power. And this is how I see it changing in the future, and I'll wrap up with this. I feel that because many people have been unhappy with the amount of power that people have at the highest levels of government, that leaders have, that we're going to have a breakdown and a breakup of those leaderships in the future. So, for instance, President of the United States or president of or leaders of other countries will have a trend of having groups as leaders and then other groups who hold them accountable. It's no longer going to be about the individual so much as the group as we move into this.
I mean, we're facing red tide now where we're located in Florida, and it's horrible. And of course, we see what's happening in government. So what you're sharing actually gives me some hope.
Yes.
But before we wrap up, can you give your website again, how people can learn more about you and book a session with you?
Oh, thank you. Well, all you have to do is just go to my website, which is KyraOser.com. And it's KYRAOS as in Sarah, ER.com. And when you go there, you can just click on a little button that says rates and scheduling, and it will guide you through, and you can just book your own session right
Kyra,
there.
thank you so much for joining us
Wonderful.
today.